My name's Catherine. I'm a physiotherapist. I use she and her pronouns. And this video is to help you learn how to lengthen your pelvic floor actively using your breath. And this is good for so many different situations. And I know a lot of people who have trouble accessing physiotherapy care might benefit from this. So I'm hoping that this video is useful for some of you who might otherwise not get in to see a physio. So first of all, what is the pelvic floor? It's a group of muscles at the base of our pelvis, and it sits right in between your sit bones. So if you feel yourself sitting on like a hard chair or the floor like I am here, you can kind of move the fleshy bits of your bottom out of the way and feel those two bony bits that kind of make contact with the floor in your bottom. So those are the sit bones. And then your pubic bone at the front, so that hard bone just at the very base of your abdominal muscles, that's kind of where the front of the pelvic floor attaches, and your tailbone at the back. So if you can imagine those 4 points, almost makes like a little diamond-shaped hammock in between those parts of your pelvis, and it really supports the base of all your organs. So it's going to support your bladder and bowels, and it has a lot of important roles in different functions like sexual function. It helps with getting fluid moving out of our legs and pelvis, and obviously bladder and bowel. So that's basically where it is, and I'll show a little video clip here of how it moves with our diaphragm. Our diaphragm's kind of that big, powerful breathing muscle at the base of our lung, or base of our rib cage here, and it works with our lungs because as the diaphragm contracts and moves down, we get air coming into the lungs, and then as it comes back up, the air moves out. So our diaphragm and our pelvic floor actually work like a little piston together, and as you breathe in, everything kind of moves down and lengthens, which is what we're going to work on today, and then as you breathe out, everything tends to lift back up. So we're going to try and harness that with our breathing and get a really good sense of control over that movement. So if you have a look at this video clip here, it's just going to show you a little image of how that diaphragm and that pelvic floor work together. Now, how do we think about lengthening the pelvic floor? Sometimes it's hard to think about how to engage this part of the body because we can't see it. We don't really think about it most days. And a lot of people, aren't even aware that they have it. A lot of people tend to think that that part of the body is only really relevant during pregnancy, but actually all human beings have a pelvis and have a pelvic floor. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what your anatomy is, everybody has a pelvis. So that's just kind of an important myth to get out of the way there. But it is a hard area to kind of figure out. So like I mentioned, a lot of the functions of this area have to do with bladder and bowel control. So that tends to be a common one that we can think of to try and get certain movements happening. And before we get into that, I'm going to suggest if you have a little face cloth at home, or even a t-shirt, a small towel, something that you can just roll up, and we're going to sit on this. So what I do is take a face cloth like this, fold it in half, and then we're going to roll it lengthwise, just like this, until it ends up being kind of the shape of a sausage or something like that. And then we're going to sit on top of this. So if it's not comfortable to sit cross-legged on the floor, you can sit on a hard chair like a kitchen chair, something like that, or you can have knees bent, feet in front. But if you want to have a seat, and what we're going to do is kind of lift our bottom up and place this right in between our sit bones. So we'll have our sit bones on either side of the face cloth, and then the pubic bone is going to be towards the front, tailbone at the back, and it's almost like a really narrow bicycle seat. So we're going to lift up, place that under our bottom, and sit back down. So with that, hopefully you're getting a little bit of pressure on the tissue in between your sit bones. And we're going to use that to almost imagine that we're pushing into. So it's kind of like a good bit of feedback there for us. And we're just going to start by taking a slow, deep breath and breathing out. And seeing, just doing that, do you notice any pressure changes? Any change when you're breathing in, pushing down, any lifting as you're breathing out, or do you not notice that? There's no wrong answers. It's just sometimes good to give that a little try first. This next one we're going to do, as we breathe in, I want you to imagine that you're bearing down as if to initiate a bowel movement. We're going to try and imagine that we're trying to pass gas or initiate a pee. Some other helpful cues are imagining your sit bones and trying to make them wider, or uncurling your tailbone. So try and think about those little movements or motions there. And we're going to try and do that as you're breathing in. And then as you breathe out, just let it all go. So hopefully with one of those cues, you might have noticed a little bit of downward motion towards the face cloth as you're imagining you're pushing out gas or initiating that bowel movement. It's just that slight bit of downward pressure. And we can do another few breaths here to practice. So let's take 3 breaths on your own time and just practice that downward movement of the pelvic floor. Now you might notice when you're doing that your abdominals are a little bit active. That's okay. The big thing that I want to make sure you're not doing is squeezing your bum cheeks or lifting the knees up as you're trying to push down. Any kind of movement around the outer hips or the legs is probably too much compensation, and you're not using muscles that are helping you. So really think about that area in between the sit bones. And sometimes it's like 25% the effort. It's a lot more subtle than you might think it is. It's just very, very slight downward pressure, but it doesn't incorporate the whole lower body. So remember that as well. And if you want to practice that some more, feel free to press pause and you can, give that a go. And I find when I'm working with people in physio, sometimes it takes a week or 2 before I'll see someone again and they're like, okay, now I got it. Now we can move on to some other things. So don't feel discouraged if you don't get it yet. Just keep practicing, keep those visuals in your head of that pelvic floor coming down. And with time, with practice, you'll definitely get there. But just coordinate it with your breathing, and that's going to make it so much easier for you. Unless you've been told otherwise to avoid certain positions or stretches, you can do pelvic floor lengthening in a lot of different positions. What we don't want to do is trying to do that pelvic floor lengthening as you're exerting effort. So for example, we wouldn't want you doing that lengthening movement in the middle of an abdominal crunch, or if you're picking something really heavy off the floor, if you're picking up a child, things like that. We really want our pelvic floor to be engaged and contracting a bit more actively. So just make sure you're not doing all that downward pressure all the time in all your tasks. There's a time and a place for it. But what is a really good time for the pelvic floor lengthening is when you're doing stretches. And it doesn't have to be overly specific. It can be whatever feels good. Some people like the butterfly stretch, or getting legs out in front and doing a bit of a hamstring stretch. Even just sitting here doing some meditations and breathing exercises, that's a great time to work on the pelvic floor lengthening. And this is going to help to decrease tension in that muscle group. It can help with all the different functions in the area at times. And especially if you've had surgery recently, if you're in preparation for a surgery, sometimes afterwards with the general anesthetic and other pain medications, it's really easy to get constipated. So by working on the pelvic floor movement and getting the hang of this before your operation, that can make it easier to get stool moving and have those bowel movements afterwards. So even if you're having surgery in a totally different part of the body, such as your chest, it's still a really good idea to work on that. And especially if you're getting pelvic surgery, those muscles can really tighten up in a protective response after operations. So by working on this pre-op, it's just going to give you that extra bit of comfort and familiarity post-op to get that muscle group moving and out of that protective phase that it might get into. So hopefully that video is useful. Feel free to give me or leave me any comments that you might want, and I'll try to help you out there. And if you're in BC and Alberta and you're looking to access physiotherapy, you can absolutely reach out to me at Shine Therapy Services, and I'll be happy to help you. And you can follow me on social media at shine.therapy.services. So yeah, wishing you all the best.